let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Wildcats at Work Virtual Meetup. This is our Health and Biosciences cluster. We've got 3 great alums here in different areas of health and biosciences, various backgrounds to chat with us about their experiences.
I'm a biology major this year. I'm trying to narrow down more specifically on what in bio I want to do, because I know I want to go potentially in the medical field. I'm just not 100% if I want to be a doctor necessarily, because I'm not good with blood and stuff like that, but I do still want to help, if that makes sense.
So yeah, so you're still wondering for sure, how to decide to get in the direction that you're going, or how to make that final decision, or.
Yeah, I'm trying to narrow down more specifically on what I want to do.
So I'll kind of jump in first, introduce myself first. I'm Mike Malik Ahmadi. I work at the Banner Alzheimer's Institute in Phoenix. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I eventually did a master's degree at University of South Florida and got my PhD from University of Westminster. Most of what my work focuses on is statistical analysis, specifically analyzing data for preclinical Alzheimer's disease. So basically trying to figure out what predictors may be able to help us identify people who are showing biological signs of Alzheimer's disease, but not the clinical symptoms, so we can intervene earlier and prevent them from eventually developing the symptoms. So for your situation, what I always advise undergraduates, because I was in a very similar situation myself, is that you sort of had a kind of a broad idea of where you want to go with your career and what you want to do. Again, as you just said, you don't really have the specifics for it. Are you working in a lab by chance right now?
Currently, I'm doing a chemistry lab, yeah.
Is it under a professor, doing research with them?
It's like a TA. We're doing we just kind of did our first lab. It was a super, super small lab. It was just testing pigments and separating them and stuff, but that's what it's at right now.
Oh, so is this attached to a course you're taking?
Yeah.
Okay. So the best thing I always recommend for people to do, because what this does is this is sort of the first step in building your career network, in that, find a professor who you can do a independent study with and actually work in their research lab, with their graduate students and other, staff that they have. That, regardless of the field you're in within, sciences or, biomedical science or health sciences, getting into a lab is one of the best first steps you can do, because, then you're working under a professor, you're getting, real kind of hands-on experience and knowledge in the field. And then you're also, if you stick with the lab, that's how you maintain a good relationship and rapport with that professor and possibly graduate students you're working with, that's how you get letters of recommendation for where you want to get to from there. And also, references for employment and things like that. So you basically end up registering for it just like you would a normal course. And depending on, your status as sophomore, junior, senior, you'll register as $2.99, $3.99, or $4.99. And, you do it that way. And, honestly, for me, I will say that was the one thing that really kind of set me apart and, helped me on my own trajectory, was doing independent studies for 2 years, my last 2 years of undergraduate in the same lab. And that's really what propelled me to where I am now. So I will give some airtime to the others now. So I do apologize for taking more, time there.
I'm Angela Toms. Very nice to meet you. I'm a field director at the U.S. Medical Affairs team for Orchard Therapeutics. And what's interesting is I thought in college I knew exactly what I wanted to do, different from where you're at. Now I became a nurse. Interestingly, that is not what I do now. So I would suggest do what you like and do what you're good at and take that first step and then take the next one. So as a philosophy for yourself. Also, I would say that there are immense possibilities out there in both the clinical practice. So you talked about doctor, nurse practitioner. physical therapy, occupational therapy, pharmacy. The list is humongous. So so hopefully that's a little bit helpful. My career was not a straightforward path. I spent a few years at the university as a nurse. I went back to school to become a nurse practitioner because I wanted to be able to specialize, and I did that and spent about 10 years being the nurse practitioner for the Hemophilia Center in Southern Arizona. And then I was recruited through LinkedIn to a company to work as a medical science liaison. And when I got that email from Biogen, and Mike, you might know who Biogen is, but they hired me as a hemophilia clinical expert, and I had no idea what a medical science liaison was at the time. I did the interview, and I learned very quickly what it was and that I could do it, and I could do it well. I work with my manager has a PhD in biochemistry. Our global chief medical officer, who she just got promoted, has a PhD in neurosciences. I work, one of my employees has a bachelor's degree in neuroscience, and her advanced degree is a doctor of veterinary medicine. And she does what I do. We interact with academic medical centers around our clinical trial data. We collect information, we bring information back to the company, we take information out of the company. That's really a simplistic way of talking about it. But it requires a great deal of diversity and specialization to be able to communicate across the client's platform, right? And Orchard Therapeutics, by the way, is a global gene therapy company. So it's really futuristic type medicine. So hopefully that's helpful. I love talking to other U of A alumni, especially in the sciences fields, and with undergraduate students that are aspiring to be U of A alumni.
I'm Ann Arnold. Just like Angela, I'm a nurse as well. See, graduated in 2005, bachelor in science and nursing. And then I knew I wanted to do pediatrics. So I went straight out of the gate, went to Phoenix Children's Hospital, started out as a new grad there, started out in the ER, and then cross-trained over to the operating room. I've done endoscopy. I worked for a little stint in Cleveland, Ohio at the Cleveland Clinic doing outpatient pediatric ear, nose, and throat. I've done peds GI. I've been a primary or a triage nurse at a primary peds clinic here at the county hospital in Phoenix. And after 16 years, I was just kind of like, I'm burned out doing bedside nursing. I'm sure Angela can attest, there's a lot of just, I don't know, politics behind it. There's a lot of just things that go into like being clinical and at the bedside. So I was just kind of, so my most recent job prior to what I do now, I was at the pediatric emergency room at Banner Thunderbird. I was just kind of perusing like Indeed one day, and I came across this job from Make-A-Wish America, and I was like, they need a pediatric nurse? Like, how weird is that? So randomly enough, I've been actually a volunteer for the Make-A-Wish Arizona chapter for 7 years. So I kind of had a background of like what Make-A-Wish entailed, like what it was like to be a volunteer wish granter, like that kind of side of it. And so then when I interviewed for it and got the position, I was like ecstatic because I was like, I love the mission that Make-A-Wish, provides. And so I actually worked, so I just celebrated 2 years with Make-A-Wish America, the national office actually. So random fun fact, Make-A-Wish started in Arizona, in Phoenix 41 years ago. So the national office is here in Phoenix. So I work as a nurse, but for a nonprofit organization, which is like, you're like, what the heck does she do? So there's only 3 of us on the National Medical Affairs team. We have very pretty strict eligibility criteria to meet criteria or to meet qualifications to get a wish. So you have to qualify medically for a wish. And so long story short, try and shorten this. So the child's provider fills out a form to kind of like prove the child's diagnosis. Then our system has an algorithm that goes through a bunch of questions. And then depending on what the insurance, like the billing code that the provider puts in, either that case auto qualifies and that kid gets a wish, or it comes to eligibility review, which is what I do. So I have a desk job, so it's so far from clinical, but I actually love it. And it's a very gratifying position because what my job entails every day is I help to determine the eligibility for for medically for children. So we work with all 59 chapters across the whole enterprise. And I do a case review every day. So I sit at a computer and look at case review and MRIs and clinic notes and all that, and help to determine if a child qualifies medically or does not qualify medically for a wish. But so I look at it from a medical standpoint, and my 16 years of PEDS experience got me to this position that I'm in today because of my background and all my years of PEDS experience and that.
You have a number of opportunities, right, in the next couple of years as you engage in your collegiate experience. And I feel like the advice that you've been given here today is something that can be very useful, to help set you up for success throughout your college education and getting involved and exposed to different areas. And it sounds to me too that the message of, not necessarily needing to know exactly what that end result or outcome is going to be, but having an idea of direction is very beneficial, and taking, the steps needed to move forward. My own career journey is not something that is directly linear. You have an interest in certain things and you pursue those passions and those interests, and then life happens. And, sometimes your direction gets taken to the left, sometimes to the right. Other times you're just heading straight and narrow down the middle. But again, just having a good understanding of what your motivations and desires and passions are, and then making connections with individuals in those areas is really the best thing that you can be doing right now and throughout your career.
You said you were a bio major, correct?
Yes.
So so this year and next, especially, you're going to be surrounded by, a lot of people who are you're going to hear, medical school talk. If you haven't already, it's just going to be constant medical school talk by many of the people in your classes and things like that. So, the thing I would say is that, don't feel like don't feel like that medical school is, the path for a biology major, because it's not. For me, being a psychology major, I went through kind of a similar thing where, most everybody who I was in courses with and had, further aspirations, we were all talking about doing graduate school. And, for me, I would kind of felt like that for what I wanted to do is like, oh, well, I have to do clinical neuropsychology if I want to be able to do this. And, I did, for the 2 years that I applied to be in clinical neuropsychology programs, I got rejected from all of them. And it turned out to be the best thing because it prompted me to really kind of, think about what it was I really wanted to do, and if there was another way to do it. And so that's how I ended up getting a master's degree in epidemiology. And, then I, just took it from there. And, honestly, there was 8 years between my master's and my PhD. And, my PhD, I will say it's very unique. It's not a typical, PhD like you have, here in the US. So mine was actually done through the University of Westminster, which is in London. And it was a PhD by published works. And so what that is that if you are, they originally designed these programs in the UK and Australia, and they did them for employees of the universities who had been able to publish papers and had, done a lot of research on behalf of the university, but for various reasons had never gone through a PhD program. So they afforded these people the opportunity to get a PhD based on, the research that they had published. And some of the universities, they open it up to other people, across their countries and across the world. And so long story short, I went through a pretty, rigorous, screening and application process to do this. But, what I ended up being able to do was, in those 8 years, between my master's and PhD, I didn't let the fact that I didn't have a PhD stop me from writing papers and getting them published in medical journals. So, I still took the initiative and people gave me the opportunity, to do that. And then I ended up using, 6 of those papers in my dissertation that, it made writing the dissertation really easy because I had all the stuff written. I just had to bookend it with an introduction and discussion section. And then, had to fly back to London to do my, oral defense, which, believe me, if you're forced to go to London, take a week. It's a really great city to be in and visit. But yeah, so I mean, and I got a PhD, based on the work that I did and that I was really interested in doing and was passionate about. And so I will say that to people, I don't, for students who want to do graduate school, my path is certainly not the first one that I recommend people try to do. It just happened to work out from my particular situation. So, I would never suggest to anybody that they, don't bother with doing a PhD program, just write some papers and then go to London and get it. No, I would never say that to anybody. Like I said, it just happened to work out from my particular, path and trajectory. But, I would just say for you, don't feel like that, you're pigeonholed, into medical school, and you're not pigeonholed if you want to go to graduate school. You have a lot of options. Some people are, there's this tendency to think that, well, my bachelor's degree is in this, so I need to go to graduate school for this. Totally not the case. People get a bachelor's degree in one thing and then often get a master's degree in another. Like me, having a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in epidemiology. There are other people who, go to computer science, lots of other things. So once you have a bachelor's degree, don't feel like that you're kind of, stuck, with a few options or down a few paths. There are, multiple ones you can take that will be, very fruitful and, helpful to you.
Never in a million years, when I graduated nursing school back in 2005, did I think I'd be working for a nonprofit as a nurse, but so not clinical, working in an office business setting for a nonprofit organization. It's a super, unique job. And I would say in terms of advice, I would say just don't limit yourself. And kind of like what Mike and Angela have already said, but not to limit yourself in terms of feeling like stuck somewhere. I started out as a and I've done peds my whole life, but I started out as a new grad in the emergency room, and then I was like, this really isn't for me. Let me go over to the OR. And then at the time, the OR and endoscopy were kind of the same department, so I cross-trained over to endoscopy and fell in love with doing endoscopy, doing scopes with the GI doctors, and did that for 4 years. Then I moved to Ohio and did, peds, ear, nose, and throat. I've done, a GI clinic. I've been a peds triage nurse. I even did a short little stint doing being a scrub nurse for a hand surgeon in the OR. And then I ended up here at Make-A-Wish. So the sky is the limit, so to speak. It's cliche, but the sky is the limit in terms of if you limit yourself, then you're kind of, again, like Mike said, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. So never be afraid to kind of think outside the box. I would say too, so I was a volunteer for Make-A-Wish Arizona, the Arizona chapter, before I became an employee with Make-A-Wish America. And I remember when the position was actually offered to me and I just accepted the position, my director, my boss, told me, hey, it actually was down to you and another candidate, and we chose you. And I truly feel like it's probably because of my resume. I was a volunteer for Make-A-Wish Arizona first, so I had that previous knowledge, and I kind of had that insider scoop in terms of what it's like to be a volunteer, and I kind of already knew what the mission was and what Make-A-Wish does for children. And so I truly think that one thing too is to kind of don't be afraid to build your resume in terms of getting involved in different, don't overstretch yourself, don't burn the candle at both ends, so to speak, but just getting involved in volunteer activities, because it's a really good resume builder as well.
I would add not just a resume builder, but a way for you to discover yourself and what your passions are, by just doing different things, whether it's volunteer or other types of jobs that you have. It sort of wrote down the quote a little bit so I would remember it, but the bigger piece of the advice is the choices you're going to have later in your life do not exist today. I graduated in 91 the first time, so I'm a little older, I think, some of them. But if you had told me in 1991 that I was going to be in a leadership position at a global gene therapy company based in London, I would have said that you're dreaming, because that is not possible for a pediatric nurse. I started out as a pediatric nurse here at the university, and I worked at the university for over 20 years before I left. So way beyond anything I could imagine at the time that I was in undergrad, for sure. So those things don't exist yet. And the only way you get there is just that one step at a time. What do you like now? What are you good at now? What makes sense for you now? And then when you're going after something, don't pay attention to artificial boundaries. One example I think was that Julian just mentioned. It was between her and another candidate, and what made them choose her. I've had those similar kinds of experiences where I knew it was between myself and another candidate. When I was hired at Biogen, which is a larger biotech company, and they don't do hemophilia or hematology anymore, but at the time they hired me because I knew about hemophilia. But the reason they hired me was they had given us an option of what to present and discuss during our interview. One was a disease state article on hemophilia, and one was an article about their products. The advice I was given by my recruiter and other colleagues was to don't you dare talk about their product to them because you're going to bury yourself. One of my mentors, who I greatly appreciate, he's a physician at the University of Arizona, he said, no, you need to show them that you can talk about their product and they'll understand that you're just learning it. And I followed his advice. And that's why I was told later by one of my friends, that later someone who later became a friend and was in the room, that is why they chose me over the other candidate. So, don't be afraid and pay attention to what, your gut tells you to do when you're making decisions.
My name's Lacey. I oversee Alumni Career and Professional Development. And one of the things that we hear a lot with, especially, employers now, and as the job workplace shifts and jobs evolve, right? I think there's a lot of shifting happening with technology, artificial intelligence, right? Like there's a lot of things that are going to be changing, especially in the healthcare industry. And, I think talking to people like Jillian, Andrea, Mike, where you can start getting a kind of an inside scoop on where is that industry evolving and how can you build skill sets now that will not just be helpful currently, but will be helpful in the future and will make you valuable as these shifts become more solidified in the industry, and really kind of carving out your niche too of where you can provide those skills and create value for yourself.
Especially with the kind of specific to Make-A-Wish, a lot of our interns end up getting hired on as full-time staff. So I would say never be afraid to kind of step outside your box, so to speak, and kind of start, you got to start somewhere, right? So let's start with volunteering, and then just kind of, if you're truly interested in nonprofit organization work, never be, never be afraid to kind of, again, think outside the box and apply for those internships and apply for those stepping stone positions, because you never know where if you might, get hired on permanently to the organization.
Thing that I always tell people as well, and I say this because it was preached to me, when I was an undergraduate. Now I preach it to, those who I work with as well, is to find a really good mentor. And, it doesn't have, in some of the books that you read about mentorship and, things like that, oftentimes people have this idea of, you have sort of this, they call it the guru. And it's somebody who is like, you consistently go back to, over and over, over the course of years for advice and, things like that. Whereas the reality is you're going to have, probably several mentors on your career path as you go up. The important thing is that you just find those individuals who are really willing to kind of take you under their wing and, show you the ways and, help you, really help you develop and help you find your path. I will say that there's no shortage of that at U of A in terms of the faculty who are there. When I was there, I graduated 18 years ago, so I imagine the culture hasn't changed, that dramatically. But, the professors who I got to work with, they eagerly wanted, undergraduates to be in their lab with their graduate students to sort of, build, the scientific pipeline. And, that kind of goes for, other fields as well. So, really kind of find and seek out those individuals who are, opening up themselves to you and others to, share their knowledge and to give you, a broader platform on which you can, propel yourself. So, that's why earlier I recommended, getting into and doing a, independent study in a professor's research lab, because it's really that mentorship that I got, not just from the professor I worked with, but with the graduate student that I worked with for those 2 years, that, really kind of, was crucial to help me develop and, really kind of solidify myself as wanting to do science and wanting to pursue the career that I did. So mentorship is key. And when you do find it, you'll appreciate it and you'll value it quite a bit as you progress along.
Okay, so my name is Benjamin Trong, and I am a dentist in the U.S. Air Force. I graduated from U of A in 2012 with a bachelor's in nutritional sciences and a bachelor's in French. Before becoming a dentist, I was actually a registered dietitian for a couple of years, then decided to go to dental school after working. So right now I'm stationed at Scott Air Force Base, right outside of St. Louis.
How, looking back onto your college experience, did you do opportunities like this where you were able to hear about different careers? And if not, knowing what you know now, how important is that? And what benefits would this give you had you have completed something like this when you were in college?
Yeah, so I'll say something. So I didn't really connect with the career services office that much. I did a lot of things on campus. I was really involved. I did a lot of leadership opportunities, and I felt that allowed me to grow in that aspect. And I knew, what things interested me and what I liked. And I always thought that that would always directly correlate with a career. So the reason why I changed careers from being a dietitian to a dentist was I realized there were some aspects of the job that didn't really fall in line with what I really wanted in a long-term career. And even though I love nutrition, I loved fitness, I love counseling and things like that, I wish I had done more shadowing and done a lot more connecting with people who were early in the careers and in their, level in their career, just kind of see, where that would take me. So I wish I had done a lot more. I mean, I'm not upset with how things turned out. I feel like I would have figured things out a lot faster if I had done this when I was in college.